I hate everything about you, Grandma. We just want to live as a family, so get out. Aurora, my eldest son's wife, screamed at me while throwing my belongings across the room. Her voice was filled with rage, and her actions left me frozen in disbelief. How did it come to this? How did I, a 75-year-old woman, become an unwanted presence in my own home? As I stood there, heartbroken, Evelyn, my younger son's wife, stepped forward. She gently took my hand and said, "Hannah, why don't you come and stay with us instead?" Her words were like a lifeline, but I could see something in her eyes, determination, perhaps even a plan. My name is Hannah, and this year, I'm turning 75. I've spent most of my life working with flower arrangements, a passion that started in my youth. For years, I rented an old house in the neighborhood to run flower arrangement classes. I never liked being too strict with my teaching. While there were rules to follow, I always believed that the joy of creating something beautiful mattered more. Perhaps because of this approach, my classes became incredibly popular, with a long waiting list of eager students. At first, I mainly taught local women, but a few years ago, Evelyn had an idea. "Why not offer flower arranging to tourists as well?" she suggested with her usual enthusiasm. Evelyn had married my younger son 2 years ago, and she was a breath of fresh air. With her cheerful personality and boundless energy, she was adored by everyone in the neighborhood. She didn't have children, but she was a loving wife and an incredible support system for my son. Thanks to Evelyn's help, my flower arrangement classes expanded, attracting students from neighboring towns. It was a blessing. I always wanted to work as long as I could, ensuring I wouldn't become a financial burden to my children. My husband, even at 70, continued working as a tax consultant, and I, too, wanted to remain independent. But despite my thriving business, my biggest struggle was at home, specifically, my relationship with Aurora. Aurora had married my eldest son, Matthew, 5 years ago. From the start, we never truly got along. Their marriage was a shotgun wedding, forced by an unplanned pregnancy. Wanting to support them, I offered our home so they could save money until they were financially stable. Matthew was grateful at first, but I soon realized I had made a mistake. Aurora had a difficult personality, blunt, demanding, and often dismissive of me and my husband. Despite being part of our family, she treated me more like a nuisance than a mother-in-law. She barely did any housework, leaving everything to me. When their child was born, I took on all the household chores, expecting that once she adjusted to motherhood, she would take over. But years passed, and nothing changed. She treated me like a live-in maid. "The shampoo in the bathroom is gone," she snapped one evening. "Oh, I must have forgotten to buy more." "Sorry, I didn't notice," I replied.
Ugh.
"Please be more responsible." "I'm busy with the kids, you know," she scoffed before walking away. Every little thing became my fault, and she never hesitated to remind me. Meanwhile, my son, Matthew, stood by her side, never once defending me. He always prioritized his wife's happiness over mine, allowing her to do as she pleased. Running my flower arrangement classes 5 days a week while also handling all the housework was exhausting. My husband noticed my fatigue, often expressing concern. He had always been a workaholic, but he was a kind man. He rarely opposed the children's decisions, and now, looking back, he sometimes regretted it. "Maybe I was too indulgent," he admitted one night, looking sad. I started to wonder if it was time for my husband and me to move somewhere else, to find peace away from this toxic environment. As I stood in that room, watching Aurora throw my things around, I realized something. This was my home, but I was no longer welcome. Aurora wanted me out. My son refused to intervene. But Evelyn had a plan. "Hannah, please come live with us," she repeated, her voice steady. I could see something in her eyes, something that gave me hope. Little did Aurora know, she was about to learn the hard way that karma always has a way of balancing things out. One afternoon, after finishing our shopping and preparing lunch, I noticed a lot of noise coming from outside. Laughter, excited voices, and the playful shouts of children filled the air. It sounded like several families were having a gathering nearby. Then, without warning, the front door swung open. A group of strangers, 5 adults and 5 children, began entering our home. "Excuse us. Come in, come in." Aurora called out cheerfully, waving them inside as if she were the hostess of the house. I stood there, stunned. The families entered with smiling faces, carrying bags of store-bought food. Some of the children immediately ran past me, their excited voices echoing through the house. "Sorry for dropping by like this," one of the adults said casually. "It's fine. Don't worry about it," Aurora responded, laughing as she led them into the living room. I was speechless. Still in shock, I turned to Aurora. "Aurora, what is this about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's okay, don't worry. Just go over there." She dismissed me with a wave of her hand, as if I were a guest in my own home. The other families spread out, placing food on the table, chatting, and settling in like they belonged there. The children, completely unsupervised, ran wild. I watched as they opened the fridge, grabbing whatever they pleased, jumped on the sofas, leaving dirty footprints on the cushions, pulled decorations from the shelves, treating them like toys. No one, not a single adult, stopped them. It was chaos. I felt overwhelmed. My own home had been turned into a playground, and no one had even asked me if this was okay. Not wanting to be in such a stressful environment, I decided to leave for a while. "I'll be back later," I muttered, grabbing my bag. Not that anyone was listening. I walked to a nearby shopping area, trying to distract myself. I treated myself to coffee at a quiet cafe, read a book, and browsed some stores. It was a small escape, but I needed it. Before I knew it, the afternoon had slipped away. When I checked the time, it was already 4 p.m. Sighing, I realized I had to return home. But a deep sense of unease settled in my chest. Would my house be in ruins? Had they left yet? As I approached the house, I could still hear the noise from inside. "They're still here." My stomach twisted. I had assumed they would have left by now. Feeling drained but knowing I needed to address the situation, I stepped inside and found Aurora chatting with her guests, completely unbothered. I took a deep breath and walked up to her. "Aurora, it's already evening. When are they leaving?" I asked, trying to remain polite. She turned to me, flashing an innocent smile.
"Oh, didn't I tell you?"
"They're staying over tonight," she said casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. My heart dropped. "What?" I gasped. "But the rooms." "We'll use your room for them," she cut me off. "So, you should just stay in a hotel tonight." I felt the blood drain from my face. She was kicking me out of my own house. "That's absurd," I said, my voice trembling. "You can't just..." But Aurora had already turned away, resuming her conversation as if I weren't even there. I felt completely powerless. I had no say in my own home anymore. Shaken, I immediately called my husband, hoping he would step in. "You won't believe what just happened," I said, my voice unsteady as I explained everything. There was silence on the other end. Then finally he spoke. "What?" His voice was filled with shock. "They're taking over our house?" Aurora really said that? "Yes," I whispered. "She wants me to stay in a hotel." He let out a heavy sigh. "Unbelievable. But what can we do? The house is already overrun with people." His words cut deep. He was right. We were powerless. Feeling lost, I decided to call my younger son, Robert. As soon as he heard the situation, he was furious. "Are you serious? Aurora is acting like that? She's making you leave your own home." I could hear the anger in his voice. Unlike Matthew, Robert had always been protective of me. "Come stay with us, Mom," he said firmly. "You don't need to put up with this." His words felt like a lifeline. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "Of course. Don't worry about it. I'm often away for work anyway, and Evelyn will love having you around. She's always saying she wishes she had more company at home," he reassured me. Tears stung my eyes. I had been forced out of my own house, but at least someone still cared. Little did Aurora know, her actions would come back to haunt her. Karma was coming. "It must have been hard for you," Evelyn said gently. "You can stay with us as long as you need." Her kindness felt like a warm embrace after everything I had been through. "Thank you," I sighed, feeling a sense of relief for the first time in a while. But what about Aurora? Didn't she say anything to you? Evelyn exchanged a glance with Robert before lowering her voice. Hannah, I was just as shocked as you. Actually, we've been having our own issues with them. I frowned. What do you mean? She hesitated for a moment before finally explaining. It turned out that Robert and Evelyn had lent money to my eldest son's family. They weren't exactly wealthy themselves, but since they didn't have children, they decided to help Matthew and Aurora when they needed financial support. At first, they believed it was temporary. But as time passed, the repayment deadline came and went, and instead of paying them back, Aurora started making excuses. She even had the audacity to get angry when asked about it. It became a huge problem, Evelyn admitted. Eventually, we just decided to let it go. We figured they'd never return the money, so we considered it a loss. I shook my head in disbelief. How much did you lend them? $10,000. My breath caught in my throat. $10,000? Such a large sum, and they didn't even bother to pay it back? That's not all, I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn's eyes widened. What do you mean? I swallowed hard before revealing what I had never told anyone. I've been giving them money every month too. Both Evelyn and Robert stared at me in shock. Really? Robert asked, his expression unreadable. I nodded. Ever since my grandchild was born, I thought they might need financial help. So I gave them $1,000 every month. Evelyn gasped. Wait, every month? Yes, I whispered. For years, I had quietly transferred money to them, believing I was helping them get by. But even with all that, they still claim to be struggling. They don't even pay rent since the house belongs to me and my husband, I added, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. Where is all that money going? I didn't have an answer, but I was about to find out. A week later, after finishing my flower arrangement class, I returned home and noticed something unusual. A white truck was parked in front of the house. Curious, I slowed my steps. Several workers, dressed in construction uniforms, were stepping out of the house, holding clipboards and measuring tools. What's going on? I approached cautiously, just in time to hear one of the workers speaking. We'll contact you again once we have the estimate. Okay. Thank you so much.
Aurora.
She stood at the doorway, smiling as she spoke to the workers. My stomach twisted. An estimate? For what? Aurora. I called out, my voice firm. What's happening? She turned to me, her smile faltering for a moment before she quickly regained her composure. Oh, nothing really, she said, brushing me off. But I wasn't going to let it go. Nothing, I repeated. Then what are they doing here? She hesitated. Then, as if realizing she couldn't hide it any longer, she let out a casual laugh. Well, we're planning a home renovation, she said. They just came to give an estimate. Her words hit me like a brick. A home renovation? I felt my heart pound. What? My voice was louder than I intended, but I didn't care. I haven't heard anything about this. When was this decided? She waved her hand dismissively. It doesn't matter when. The house is old, and we're making it more comfortable to live in. I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. But we don't have that kind of money, I pointed out. How do you expect to pay for this? Aurora's smile didn't waver. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and said something that made my blood run cold. For the comfort of our family, please take care of it. We don't have the money to pay. I felt dizzy. I had to steady myself against the doorway. Did I hear that correctly? Aurora had not only planned a renovation behind our backs, but she also expected me and my husband to pay for it. I took a step forward, my voice shaking with disbelief. That's absurd. Aurora crossed her arms, looking annoyed. Why are you acting like this? It's not a big deal. The house is old. My friends all have beautifully renovated homes, and honestly, it's embarrassing living in a place like this. Embarrassing. That was her reasoning. Not safety. Not necessity. She just wanted a trendy, stylish house to impress her friends. I couldn't believe my ears. My husband and I had worked our entire lives to build this home. We had allowed them to stay here rent-free, given them financial support every month, and even tolerated Aurora's rude behavior. And now, she was demanding that we fund her personal makeover project? This was the last straw. A storm of emotions built up inside me: anger, frustration, exhaustion. I had sacrificed so much for my eldest son's family, only to be treated like a disposable inconvenience. I clenched my fists. No more. Aurora had taken advantage of us for far too long. She was about to learn that I wasn't going to be her doormat anymore. The tables were about to turn. I stood there, speechless. The weight of Aurora's arrogance crashed down on me like an avalanche. I had been considering asking my eldest son's family to find their own place, but Aurora's renovation plans made it clear they intended to stay long-term. The thought of living under the same roof for years to come filled me with dread. I had reached my limit. I needed to talk to someone who would understand. That person was Evelyn. Both of us had suffered at the hands of Aurora and Matthew, and over time, it had become easier to share our frustrations. I poured out everything: her disrespect, her financial irresponsibility, and now her plan to renovate the house without consulting us. "She started planning renovations on her own, Evelyn," I said, shaking my head. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Unbelievable."
Yes.
"And it looks like we're expected to pay for it," I added bitterly. "Is there any way to stop her?" Evelyn suddenly leaned forward, her lips curling into a smirk. "Let's teach that couple a lesson." I blinked.
How?
She crossed her arms confidently. "I have the perfect plan. Let's fight back." Her determination was infectious. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. 1 week later, Evelyn arrived at my house, a determined look on her face. In her hand, she held a small recording device. I raised an eyebrow. "What's that for?" "You'll see," she whispered, before turning to Aurora. She pressed record. "Aurora, when will you return the money?" Aurora scoffed, arms crossed. "What? I can't right now. We have a child, after all." Evelyn and I exchanged a glance. There it was. Yet again, she was using her child as an excuse to dodge responsibility. She had borrowed the money. She had promised to return it. But now that it was time to pay up, she was acting like the victim. Frustration simmered in my chest. I took a deep breath, then spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Well, our grandchild is starting elementary school soon," I began, watching her reaction closely. "So perhaps it's time for you to move out." Aurora's head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. I didn't waver. "I'm getting old," I said. "I want to live peacefully." Panic flickered across her face for a split second. But then, as if flipping a switch, her anger flared. "We're about to renovate," she shouted. "There's no way we're leaving." Her voice echoed through the house. Caught off guard by my sudden defiance, she lashed out. "I hate everything about you," Aurora screamed. "We want to live just as a family, so get out." Before I could react, she grabbed my belongings and began throwing them around the room. My hands trembled as I watched years of my life being tossed aside like garbage. It was too much. Seeing this, Evelyn made up her mind. She stepped forward and grabbed my hand. "Hannah," she said firmly, "then please come to our house if you'd like." Her voice was steady, filled with resolve. It was clear Evelyn had a plan. Leaving an enraged Aurora behind, we walked out together. I didn't look back. Once we reached Robert and Evelyn's house, Evelyn wasted no time. She sat me down at the kitchen table and laid out her plan. "Listen," she said, her eyes burning with determination. "If things stay as they are, they'll do whatever they want with the house and continue draining your money. We have to fight back." I swallowed. "But how?" Evelyn smirked. "First," she said, "you need to stop all payments for the house." I frowned. "But I live there, won't that cause problems?" Evelyn shook her head. "Think about it, Hannah. Do they contribute anything? Do they pay for groceries, electricity, water, or even neighborhood association fees?" I hesitated. The truth was, they didn't. Not one single cent went from Aurora or Matthew toward household expenses. My husband and I covered everything. Realization dawned on me. I see. Not only that, Evelyn continued, but stop giving them the $1,000 every month. I stiffened. But if I do that, won't I have nowhere to live? That was my biggest fear. I was 75 years old. Buying a new house at my age wasn't an option. Evelyn reached out and squeezed my hand. You'll stay in the house until our counterattack is over. I nodded slowly, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement. I had always played the role of the generous mother, giving endlessly despite never being appreciated. But this time I was done. Aurora thought she had won. She thought she could take everything from me. But she was about to learn that she messed with the wrong woman. I couldn't deny it. I felt weak for fearing the loss of the house. But Evelyn's unwavering determination gave me strength. Hannah, she said, her eyes filled with seriousness, we need to make Matthew realize how much they've taken advantage of you. Besides, we don't know how long we'll be able to work, so we should start saving for ourselves. I took a deep breath and nodded firmly. You're right. With Evelyn's help, I made a critical change. I switched all house-related payments. Previously, the utility bills had been charged directly to my credit card.
Now?
I arranged for paper statements to be sent to the house instead. If Aurora and Matthew didn't check the mail, which they rarely did, they might not even realize the bills were due. And when they missed the payments, the utilities would be cut off. Evelyn and I exchanged a knowing smirk. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The next phase of our counterattack came just in time, Aurora's renovation plans. Since they were so desperate to make the house their own, my husband and I decided to give them what they wanted. A talk was scheduled with Matthew and Aurora. As we gathered in the living room, Aurora was in high spirits. Is the renovation starting next month? I asked. Yes, she answered, her excitement turning into defensiveness. But do you still have complaints? I ignored her rude tone. It's not about that, my husband said calmly. As you mentioned before, the elderly should pass their homes on to the younger generation. So, we've decided to give this house to Matthew and his family. Aurora froze. Matthew's eyes widened. And then, yes. Finally, Aurora cheered, clapping her hands. Matthew grinned smugly. The house is ours. Lucky us. Aurora tossed her hair back, smirking. Just so you know, if you ask for it back later, it's not happening. I felt a pang of irritation but swallowed it down. I had to stay focused. You can remodel the house however you like, I said smoothly. Young people have their own tastes, my husband added. Aurora beamed. But then, now that you're no longer residents here, she said, crossing her arms, could you please leave quickly? This is our house now. My hands tightened into fists. Matthew added, make sure to move your stuff out fast. I took a deep breath, reminding myself, this was all part of the plan. Soon after, Evelyn helped me pack up our belongings and move to my younger son's house. I feel like I'm always troubling you, I sighed. Evelyn just grinned. What are you talking about, Hannah? The real counterattack is just beginning. Not long after, an estimate from the remodeling company arrived. And when my younger son's family and I saw the cost, we were stunned. This isn't just changing wallpaper and flooring, I whispered. They're relocating the stairs, changing the entire layout. The cost? As much as building a brand new house. Can they even afford this? My daughter-in-law asked. Probably not, I admitted. But it's their doing. Aurora, oblivious to reality, spent her days poring over interior design magazines rather than doing housework. She picked out luxury chandeliers, custom-built cabinets, and expensive imported tiles, as if money was unlimited. It was almost laughable. The remodeling company contacted us for payment. Evelyn and I smiled knowingly. We're giving the house to our son and his wife, I told them. Please charge them for everything. The contractor nodded. Understood. Then came the biggest blow. The down payment alone was over $10,000. I doubted they had that kind of money. So I waited. A few days later, an infuriated Aurora barged into my younger son's house. What is this about us having TO pay? She screeched. I sipped my tea calmly. You said you wanted to renovate, so we let you. What's the problem? You said you'd pay. Aurora's voice rose. I tilted my head. Why would I? You told me to leave. The house is yours now. So, the bills are yours too. Aurora gaped at me. At that moment, Evelyn snapped. Enough is enough, she shouted. Hannah and her husband have paid for everything, your rent, groceries, and even giving you $1,000 every month. Aurora's jaw dropped. $1,000? She repeated. Her face twisted in confusion. What are you talking about? Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Didn't you know? Maybe your husband was using it secretly. Aurora's face turned pale. My lips curled into a satisfied smirk. Birds of a feather, I added. Aurora staggered back. I'm sorry, I said, standing up, but from now on, I won't be giving you a single dollar. No way. Why? But I was done. I turned away and deleted her contact information. Aurora was forced to apologize to her relatives and borrow money for the down payment. They had no intention of repaying it. Now that they had kicked me out and taken the house, they were on their own. With no financial support, their bills piled up. Aurora had to work without days off. Their marriage crumbled. One day, Aurora made a devastating discovery. Matthew had been blowing the $1,000 I sent him every month on clubs, drinking, and other women. She found business cards from hostess clubs in his suit pocket. It led to a massive fight. At one point, they even considered divorce, but neither of them could afford alimony. Reality had finally hit them. Aurora called me one last time. Hannah, won't you come back home? I smirked. You just want my money, don't you? And no, I just thought you'd prefer the house you're used to. I hung up, and then I blocked her. Eventually, they couldn't afford the renovation costs.
They were forced to sell the house.
Aurora's tacky design choices made it hard to sell. Evelyn laughed. Maybe we should buy it now. I never looked back. Instead, my husband and I moved into a beautiful 120-year-old traditional home. I resumed my flower arrangement classes, and for the first time in years, I was truly happy. Aurora and Matthew had lost everything.
And as for me?
I had finally won. Please feel free to comment below if you like this. Remember to like and subscribers for more.